You just don't do that to somebody. You don't leave them in the field. You just don't.
Family now can rest at peace and knowing that the murderer is behind bars and will be there for the rest of his life.
On the night of August 6th, 2011, Dalene Carlson walked out of a bar in Stockton, California, and was never seen alive again. That night started like any other. Music playing, laughter, friends gathered at Finnegan's Bar and Grill. People danced. Drinks were passed around. Dalene showed up wearing a black tank top, jeans, and a smile. She looked like someone who was ready to have a good time. No one knew it would be her last night. She left with a man she had known for just a week. His name was Jason Gilley. He was quiet, older than her, and not many people knew much about him. There were cameras outside the bar. They caught the moment she stepped into the night with him, and that was it. Dalene never called. She didn't go home. She didn't show up at work. Her phone stopped ringing. Her family panicked. They searched every street, every hospital, every corner of Stockton. They begged for help. They posted flyers. They made phone calls. They didn't sleep. Days passed. Then weeks. And still, nothing. Then, one morning, 2 months later, a farmer walked into a cornfield near Escalon, 30 miles away from the bar. There, in the dirt, was the answer no one wanted. Dalene was dead. She had been shot. Not once, but 3 times. Once in the back of her head. Twice in her stomach. She had been left in the middle of nowhere like she meant nothing. What really happened in those hours after she left the bar? Did she trust the wrong person? Or did she already know something was going to happen? Let's find out together. Thank you for tuning in. Stay with us as we walk through the final hours of Dalene Carlson's life and the twisted path that led to a hidden cornfield no one was supposed to find. Now let's get back to the very beginning. It was a Saturday night, the kind of night people look forward to after a long week. The lights at Finnegan's Bar and Grill glowed across the parking lot as music thumped from inside. People were drinking, laughing, and moving through the crowd without a care. Inside, Dalene Carlson sat with a few friends. She was smiling, chatting, and by all accounts, enjoying herself. Dalene had recently moved back to California from South Dakota. She wanted a fresh start. She had plans, dreams. People close to her described her as sweet, outspoken, and fun to be around. That night, she seemed relaxed, comfortable in the crowd, but there was one person who stood out from the rest. Jason Gilley. He wasn't a familiar face to most of her friends. He had only been around for a week. No one really knew much about him, except that he worked at a local store and had been messaging Dalene. Some said they met at a party the weekend before. Others believed he started showing up at the same places Dalene liked to go. Whatever the truth was, he had her attention that night. Surveillance footage from outside the bar would later become a key piece of this story. The video showed Dalene walking outside with Jason around 11:30 p.m. She didn't look scared. She didn't hesitate. She followed him willingly, walking just a step behind him. Then they turned a corner, out of sight. That would be the last known footage of her alive. A few hours after that moment, something changed. Dalene's phone stopped responding. Her friends started calling her around midnight, but she wasn't answering. At first, no one panicked. Maybe she had gone home. Maybe she was sleeping. But by the next morning, when she didn't respond to texts or return calls, people started to worry. Her phone remained off. Her social media was silent. That wasn't like her at all. Her family reported her missing almost immediately. Her mother, Cindy, felt it in her gut. Something was wrong. Police began their investigation, but early on, things were slow. Dalene was an adult, and technically, adults had the right to go off the grid. But Cindy knew her daughter. She wasn't the type to vanish. If you're watching this video and thinking about the people in your life, ask yourself, are they safe? Are they happy? Are they being treated with respect and care? You can make a difference just by noticing the signs early. As investigators started digging, they quickly turned their attention to Jason Gilley. He wasn't answering his phone either. When officers showed up at his house, he wasn't there. It would take days before they could track him down, and when they finally did, the story he gave didn't quite make sense. He told them he and Dalene went for a drive. They talked. He dropped her off around midnight, somewhere near her house. He claimed she wanted to go home alone. No witnesses could confirm that. No surveillance cameras caught her walking anywhere else after she left the bar. Then came a twist. Police checked Jason's phone records. According to tower pings, he hadn't stayed near Stockton that night. His phone had traveled northeast, toward a remote area near Escalon. Even more disturbing, Dalene's phone followed the same path for a while, before going completely dead around 1 a.m. Investigators kept pushing. They obtained Dalene's social media activity and found something odd. She had posted less frequently during the week she knew Jason. Friends noticed she had mentioned him in passing, even joking that he was kinda weird, but nice. Others said she wasn't herself that week, distracted, quieter. One friend claimed she told them she thought Jason was intense and had been texting her nonstop. At first, she liked the attention. Then it got too much. Did she try to end things that night? And if she did, how did Jason respond? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. Police searched Jason's vehicle. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, no blood, no broken glass. But the car's back seat was cleaner than the rest, suspiciously spotless. The kind of clean that only comes from someone trying to erase something. Meanwhile, Dalene's family started their own search. They organized volunteer groups. They hung flyers on street poles. They knocked on doors and walked through fields. They spoke with anyone who might have seen a blue car like the one Jason drove. But days turned into weeks. The case felt like it was slipping away. The day after Dalene disappeared, her loved ones refused to sit still. Her mother, Cindy, didn't wait for the police to take the lead. She gathered close friends and family and began making calls. One by one, more people joined the effort. Neighbors, classmates, co-workers. Everyone wanted to help. Within 48 hours, they had printed hundreds of missing person flyers with Dalene's face on them. Her image was posted on every store window in Stockton. It was plastered across light poles, traffic stops, and bulletin boards. Missing, Dalene Carlson, last seen at Finnegan's Bar. Local news stations picked up the story. Reporters interviewed her mother, who stood in front of the camera with swollen eyes and a shaking voice. My daughter didn't run away. Someone has her. We need help. Volunteers showed up with flashlights and gloves. They searched empty parking lots, alleys, and fields. People brought their dogs, hoping maybe a scent would lead to something. Each hour that passed felt heavier than the last. And still, nothing. As the days turned into a week, Cindy kept calling Dalene's phone, even though she knew it was off. Sometimes she left messages anyway, just in case her daughter could somehow hear them. Baby, we're not giving up on you, she whispered one night through tears. I promise. Police were under pressure. The media was growing louder. Why hadn't there been an arrest? Why was Jason Gilly still free? But behind the scenes, investigators were working around the clock. They were pulling Jason's cell tower records, combing through surveillance footage, checking his past, looking for any crack in his story. Then something happened. On the 9th day of the search, someone called in a tip. It was a woman who lived a few blocks from Jason. She said she saw a car that matched Dalene's, a red Toyota Corolla, parked oddly on her street 3 nights after Dalene went missing. It was gone the next morning. That tip triggered a deeper search. Officers fanned out across rural roads and nearby towns. A few days later, in an abandoned lot on the outskirts of town, hidden behind a chain-link fence and tall weeds, they found it. Dalene's car. The inside was mostly clean, but there were signs someone had been there after her. The driver's seat was pushed far back, like someone taller had been using it. Police found strands of hair on the passenger seat. There were fast food wrappers on the floor, even though Dalene's friends said she never ate that kind of food. But what stood out most was the trunk. Inside, they found smudged fingerprints. They were partial, but they were enough. Investigators rushed the prints to forensics. And while the results didn't come back instantly, they had enough to keep pushing. Dalene's loved ones were breaking down under the pressure. Her aunt, Michelle, spoke to a local reporter. "Every day I wake up thinking, is today the day we find her? Or is today the day we lose hope?" A friend named Rachel shared something even more haunting. Dalene told me she was getting weird texts the day before she disappeared. She didn't say from who, but now I wonder if she was scared and just didn't want to say it. As more of her friends came forward, a pattern began to emerge. Jason had been possessive. One friend claimed he showed up at a small gathering uninvited, just to check if Dalene was there. Another said he once followed her car for a few blocks when she didn't reply to his messages. These weren't official reports at the time, but in hindsight, they painted a terrifying picture. And yet, there was still no trace of Dalene herself. 10 days, then 15, then 20. The search spread beyond Stockton. Flyers were mailed to towns across California. Candlelight vigils were held in front of Finnegan's Bar and outside Dalene's old high school. Hundreds came to light candles and share prayers. But hope was thinning. Then, on day 26, came another twist. A farmer near Escalon, a quiet town about 20 miles from Stockton, called the police. He had been working on irrigation near his cornfield when he noticed tire tracks cutting through the dirt, tracks that weren't from his equipment. They led to a spot near a small ditch surrounded by brush. He followed the tracks with curiosity, thinking maybe someone had dumped garbage on his land. Instead, he found a heavy black tarp tucked behind some overgrown weeds. He didn't touch it. He just stood there, staring at the edges of what looked like human hair sticking out from the folds. That moment led to the call that would end the search, but begin a nightmare. Police arrived quickly. Helicopters circled, and soon after, Dalene's family received the news no parent is ever prepared for. Police stood in silence, staring at the tarp they had just peeled open. They knew before the coroner even arrived. It was Dalene. She had been missing for nearly 2 months. Hope had faded. Rumors had swirled. But now, her story had reached a heartbreaking turn. Her body was curled slightly, as if she had fallen forward. She was clothed, but her clothes were damp and dirty from exposure. Time and weather had taken their toll, yet certain details were still clear. There were 3 gunshot wounds, 1 in the back of her head and 2 in her abdomen. The shot to the head was fatal. There was no struggle in that moment. No chance to run. It had been sudden. Investigators immediately sealed off the entire area. Crime scene tape surrounded the cornfield as forensics combed through the site. They documented everything: footprints, tire tracks, even small wrappers left nearby. It wasn't much, but every detail mattered. Back in Stockton, the news hit like a thunderclap. Dalene's family received the call. Her mother collapsed in the hallway of her home before she could make it to the couch. Her sister screamed and then stood in silence, staring into space as though her mind couldn't accept what she'd just heard. Dalene wasn't just missing. She was murdered. Dalene had likely been killed the same weekend she went missing. She had been dead for weeks. Whoever killed her had kept her body hidden before eventually dumping it in that remote field. Why? Why wait so long? And why that specific spot? Detectives returned to Jason Gilley's known whereabouts during the time she vanished. He lived less than 30 miles from that field. The location, while remote, was not unknown to him. He had family in the Escalon area. It was close enough to be convenient, far enough to delay discovery. Police re-examined the timeline. August 7th, Dalene disappears after leaving Finnegan's Bar with Jason. August 10th, a neighbor reports seeing a car matching Dalene's near Jason's home. Mid-August, her phone goes dead, last pinging near an agricultural zone not far from Escalon. September, Jason tells conflicting stories to friends and police. Late September, Dalene's car is found, abandoned. October 23rd, her body is discovered. And then came the break police were waiting for. Buried in phone records and GPS data, detectives found movement that contradicted Jason's earlier statements. He told investigators he had been at home the entire weekend Dalene disappeared. But his phone told a different story. It had pinged near Escalon more than once. And then came the final piece. The fingerprints pulled from Dalene's car, they matched Jason Gilly. He had been in her vehicle after she went missing. He had lied. Police obtained a warrant and they arrested Jason Gilly. Now that Jason was in custody, the question changed. It wasn't just what happened to Dalene. It became why. What was his motive? Why did a man she had only known for a week end her life so violently? And were there signs people missed that could have saved her? Back at the Stockton Police Department, the mood had shifted. What started as a missing person case had turned into a murder investigation, and all eyes were now on Jason Gilly. Detectives brought him in for questioning. The detective started slow. "Tell us again what happened the night Dalene disappeared." Jason leaned back and shrugged. "We left the bar. She wanted to go for a ride. I dropped her off near her house. Simple, casual, like nothing ever happened." But detectives had already seen the surveillance footage. They knew she left with him. They also knew she never made it home. Jason's story didn't add up, and as they pressed him, his answers got messy. First, he said they drove around for a bit. Then, it became a few hours. Later, he mentioned she wanted to stop at a gas station, though no camera in the area picked them up that night. When detectives asked why he hadn't come forward earlier, why he hadn't helped in the search, Jason said he didn't want to get involved. That answer sat wrong with everyone in the room. But the truth was, Jason had spent more time with Dalene than he let on. Friends later came forward, saying they had seen them together earlier that week. Text messages between them revealed she had confided in him, just days before she vanished. It wasn't love. It wasn't even a relationship. But she was starting to trust him. That trust was the crack he slipped through. Detectives dug into Jason Gilly's past, and more questions began to surface. He had a history, small offenses, mostly drug possession, resisting arrest, a couple of fights in bars. Nothing major. But what stood out was a pattern of manipulative behavior. Several ex-girlfriends had reported controlling tendencies. One even filed a restraining order, stating he became obsessive and unpredictable after she tried to leave him. Dalene wouldn't have known all this. She had only known him for a week. And that's what made the timeline so terrifying. 1 week. 7 days. That's all it took. Jason's behavior during the investigation only made things worse. He refused a polygraph. He declined to give a detailed statement. And when asked if he'd go back to the bar to reenact their movements that night, he simply said, no. Search warrants were issued for his home, his car, and his phone records. What they found was troubling. On his phone were deleted messages. Most of them had been wiped, but fragments remained. One from Dalene read, "Are you sure you're okay? You seemed off earlier." Another said, "I don't want to go too far out. Maybe just drive around town." Her words painted a very different picture from Jason's version. She was cautious. He had pushed. Detectives then analyzed his GPS data. His vehicle had made several stops the night Dalene went missing, including one, around 2:13 a.m., in the exact same region where her body was found 2 months later. The pieces were fitting together. Jason had lied about his timeline. He had lied about where they went. And now, his phone and car data tied him to the cornfield where Dalene's life ended. Fast forward to the trial day. The courtroom was filled with silence as people took their seats. Some were there for justice. Others came out of curiosity. But for Dalene's family, this was the day they had waited for. Through weeks of searching, months of grieving, and endless nights filled with questions, Jason Gilly stood at the defendant's table, wearing a suit that didn't fit quite right. He looked smaller somehow, far from the man seen smiling on bar surveillance just hours before Dalene vanished. The prosecution opened with a statement that pulled no punches. This is not a case of coincidence. This is a case of calculated violence. A young woman is dead. Her last known companion, the defendant, led her away into the night, and she never came back. They began laying out the evidence piece by piece. CCTV footage of Dalene leaving with Gilly, her text messages, his changing story, the GPS data placing him near the cornfield, and finally, the medical examiner's testimony. Dalene had been shot 3 times, once in the back of her head, twice in the abdomen. No signs of a struggle, no attempt to cover it up, just abandonment. It was the coldness of the crime that struck everyone hardest. Then came the defense. Jason Gilly's attorney painted a different picture. They called it a tragedy, not a murder. They claimed Dalene had been drinking, that emotions were high, that maybe the gun accidentally went off. They described it as a crime of passion, a moment of heat, something that got out of control. But the evidence didn't match. There were no defensive wounds, no signs of a struggle, no panicked 911 call, no effort to get help, just silence, and a body hidden in a field for nearly 2 months. Then came a surprising moment in court. Jason took the stand. His voice was low. He didn't cry. He didn't beg. He said, "I didn't mean for things to go that way. I wish I could take it back." But he gave no clear explanation, no remorse that felt real. And in that moment, Dalene's mother turned her face away. She had waited so long to hear the truth. And once again, she was given nothing. The jury didn't take long. After 2 days of deliberation, the verdict was announced. Jason was found guilty and convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There was no celebration in the courtroom, no cheers, just the quiet sound of justice finally settling in a place where heartbreak had lived for far too long. Dalene's family hugged one another. Tears fell. Her aunt whispered, "We did it, baby. We didn't stop. We found you." But even with a conviction, there were questions that would never be answered. What truly happened in those final moments? Why did Jason pull the trigger? Did Dalene ever sense the danger, or did she trust him until the very end? The truth about that cornfield, what was said, what was done, how it all really ended, may forever be locked away with the man who took her life. Her story became a warning, a reminder, and a cry for justice that echoed through the streets of Stockton. Dalene's family gathered around a memorial. Her picture, framed in white, rested among flowers and candles, a simple tribute to the woman whose life had been so violently cut short. As her mother placed a fresh bouquet of roses at the memorial, a quiet moment of silence filled the air. It was a moment to reflect, to mourn, but also to remember the fight for justice that had ultimately brought some semblance of closure. Dalene's case had left its mark, not only on her family, but on the entire community. It was a reminder that anyone can fall victim to the unexpected, that even a seemingly innocent encounter with someone you think you can trust can turn into a nightmare. But it also reminded everyone about the importance of standing up, of never giving up, and of always searching for the truth. Dalene's death was a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. But her case sparked a conversation, a necessary one. It brought to light the hidden dangers that lurk in our everyday lives. Sometimes, people put their trust in the wrong person. And sometimes, those people don't have the best intentions. If you or someone you know is in a dangerous situation, if you're worried about a relationship that doesn't feel right, don't stay silent. Don't ignore the signs. Reach out for help. Speak to someone you trust. There are resources, there are people who care, and there are steps you can take to stay safe. Dalene's story is not over. Her memory lives on in those who loved her and in the lessons we learn from her tragic end. Let's make sure we listen, stay aware, and stand up for what's right, so that no more lives are lost like this. Thank you for watching, and see you in my next video.